And she is back, guys. Vanessa the TERF that I made a video on a while ago is back. You probably didn't even notice that she was gone, because most people aren't weirdly obsessed with how other people live their life in a way that makes them happy. Her audience are quite the goofballs, and I would know because I've seen them in my comments. There was this one grown woman fighting a bunch of LGBTQ+ minors in my comment section and calling them triggered when she was the only one that seemed keen on wasting her time responding to every single comment, and then went on to thank them for entertaining her. Whatever it is that helps her sleep at night, I guess, but her actions speak for themselves. And of course, I'd never forget this. Presumably a woman with a name that I won't tell you because I don't want to give them any sort of traction, but trust me, their name is ridiculous. What stands out about this person is that they upload videos ranging from 10 seconds to 3 minutes, just whispering TERF stuff. The audio is really crunchy, you can hear that they're outside and the screen is always completely black.
Trans cop be like, what do you mean trans women are sexist men? Explain, what do you mean? What do you mean, duh? What do you mean?
No, I won't explain it. It's too obvious, and if you can't get something that's that obvious, I don't think that you're capable of understanding anything else to be said about it. I think you're locked in a narcissist delusion, and ain't nobody got time for that shit.
I find it really funny because I just imagine some villain that just escaped from Arkham Asylum and got their hands on a phone, so they're just uploading incoherent TERF ASMR onto YouTube and commenting nonsense on every trans-related video they find as if they're gonna convince anyone of anything. Instead of the Riddler, they're called the TERFler. Vanessa got quite the audience, doesn't she? Not that I'm jealous, I would much rather eat shit than be part of her reactionary clique. There's been quite a few major updates since we last visited our girl. For example, she got a Patreon, isn't that exciting? Then she got booted off of Patreon and was banned from YouTube and Twitter. Between you and me, I actually did contact Patreon about her dangerous content with examples, such as the time she heavily insinuated that Dr. hnryP here on YouTube is a pedophile because he made a video talking about the benefits of puberty blockers. What he's doing is extremely important, and I commend him for that. He's advocating for something that can significantly improve the quality of a trans kid's life, and she purposely misconstrues that as Adrian being attracted to prepubescent kids and therefore wants them to take puberty blockers to stay that way. It's willfully ignorant, and I feel disgusting for even saying that. I'm probably gonna leave a link to hnryP's video in the description. Anyways, I'm not one for wanting to deplatform people, even if I disagree with them, but in this case I think it's completely justified, and seeing as she got banned, I suppose the platforms she's spreading her dangerous ideology and misinformation would agree with me. However, she's back and kicking as expected. It's not like there's anything else she could do, seeing as she lost her job due to transphobia. I covered that in my initial video, so she's doing the most of her quote-unquote cancellation, trying to sell her horrendous shirt designs. It's not the worst thing I've seen. I'm sure there's kids out there with less talent, or maybe a shrimp, because as it turns out they can't actually see any additional colours. On the other hand, it's not good enough for anyone to actually want to buy it just because they like the design. Let's face it, it looks like something a nephew would make, and if it wasn't for the fact that it would be kind of rude, you would just throw it away, maybe even burn it. The only reason anyone would like to buy this is because they're a terrible and narrow-minded person. I'm interrupting my own video for a quick commercial break. Did you grow up reading a book series about an unspecified Brit-bong wizard? Were you shocked to find out that the author of these books turned out to be a raging transphobe? Or did the anticlimactic ending where everything returned to the status quo and all the unaddressed injustices being swept under the rug leave you expecting nothing less? If you still want to express your love for the franchise while actively condemning the author for promoting transphobia, I've got the perfect thing for you. Head on over to my sister's Redbubble and get yourself this Elf and Trans Alliance shirt, or stickers, or magnet, or pin, or mug, and a bunch of other stuff. Whatever suits your taste, they probably have it. The design is inspired by Vanessa's own print, except I decided to make it better. As a trans person, I can really sympathize with the elves from this wizard franchise. They were never really given rights, so it's not really a surprise that the author think that us trans people should have our rights violated too. Aligning myself with her own creation is a funny way to stick it to her. I stand with Dobby. Socks should be the symbol of trans liberation. That's all I had to say. Back to the video. I know she's probably gonna play dumb and say something akin to, I'm just expressing my love for J.K. Rowling, and how come I can't make videos on trans women calling them predators and comparing their bottom surgery to genital mutilation, but you can make 2 videos being really aggressive towards me. And that's right, Vanessa. I can make videos like this because there's a huge difference. You can't make a scene at McDonald's and not expect me to drag you out to the back and settle it there. If I'm charitable towards you, which in all honesty I don't think you deserve, but I haven't done my good deed for today, so count yourself lucky. We could go off the assumption that you genuinely don't know what is wrong with your videos and how they're hateful. It's easy for you to hide behind the statement, well, it's just facts, and if you get angry, it's because you're brainwashed by the trans cult and want to silence anyone who speaks the truth. I know people like you love to see yourselves as some kind of anti-hero, but just because something sparks outrage doesn't mean it's the truth. Sometimes people are outraged because what you're presenting is so grossly out of context. You say it's not hate speech because you're not telling anyone to go and beat up a trans person, when that's the most rigid definition of hate speech, that it's difficult to actually believe you're not doing it on purpose. If this was about anything other than trans people, then maybe, just maybe, you'd see just how disgusting and harmful the content you're making is. For example, the black crime rates. It's so easy to look at the statistics and conclude black people are more prone to crimes because they're inherently aggressive or something. And I shouldn't have to say this, but not only is that the laziest conclusion, it's also a racist take. It doesn't acknowledge all the ways that black people and other POC are at a disadvantage and therefore pushed into crimes, nor does it acknowledge the racial bias, which often allows white people to get away with crimes because it's no biggie, we all make mistakes, right? But if POC does literally the same thing, it's because they lack morals. Still, I don't know if this will resonate with her, because as with most TERFs, I've got an inkling that she might not only be transphobic, but also racist. She calls it radical, but radical doesn't always mean good. She says she's left, but can you really call yourself left when the only people you associate with are right? This might sound extreme, but trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Just know that I'm right. I mean, I'm actually left, but you know where I'm getting at. TERFism is just a gateway to white supremacy, if not actually just white supremacy. Think about it. They use the exact same talking points, they engage with no Nazis, yet people like her assume we're just pulling it out of our asses as expected. It wouldn't be easy radicalizing someone if they were aware of their proximity to white supremacy. They've zeroed in on the issues of gender inequality that they've just completely forgotten to take literally anything else into account.
I know that Marx is about a bunch of like made up classes and theories and all that kind of stuff, and I don't really care about that. I care about like material reality, and in my mind, there are only 2 classes that exist of humans. Males and females.
Honestly, the video should have ended here. She just told us that the bourgeoisie and the proletariat are actually just genders. Because all bad things must be because of gender fuckery here on the left. Listen, I think sexism is bad. Don't do it. If someone asks you, hey nerd, have you ever tried some sexism? All the cool kids are doing it. Say no. But her one-dimensional thinking brings us into really yikesy territory, like this clip she includes in her video.
Why is it socially acceptable for men to put on dresses, makeup, and high heels and act out every offensive stereotype, bitchy, catty, dumb, slutty, etc., but it is not socially acceptable for a white person to put on blackface and act out offensive stereotypes of African Americans? Shouldn't both be okay or neither?
If you really, really want to, you could argue that drag is perpetuating harmful stereotypes of women.
Could you give us some of your political beliefs?
Kill everyone now!
I think it's a stupid argument, but I'll throw you a bone. However, it's nowhere near comparable to blackface. Minstrel shows were a form of entertainment that would reinforce all the negative stereotypes to quote-unquote show us that black people really are beneath white people, as to justify our absolutely monstrous treatment of them. Don't you dare compare that to a bunch of middle-aged gay men putting on wigs and fake nails and insulting each other for entertainment. This sad attempt at comparing sexism to racism, along with their statements that men are always the oppressors and women are always the oppressed no matter what, tells us that not only does she think all oppression is equal, but that sexism outweighs racism. No matter your identity, woman, disabled, gay, or trans, we're still white, and that gives us access to safety and resources that can be out of the question for people of color. Her entire ideology is built on the belief that femininity is inherent and must be protected at all costs. And she truly believes that, without taking a step back to realize that, God, I'm playing a role that is needed to uphold white supremacy. By playing the victim of every man, no matter their social status and race, you've successfully weaponized your own perceived fragility to hurt marginalized men. You might be a woman, but your white lies weigh heavier than any black man's life. Emmett Till was only 14 years old when in 1955 he was lynched, or rather brutally murdered, after allegedly offending a white woman in her own family store. This incident isn't the only one of its kind, as we've seen with the BLM protests. Just because some of us are only hearing about it now doesn't mean it hasn't always been there. It serves as evidence that black men and people of color in general are seen as more disposable, and they could lose their own life at one wrong step, or if they're at the wrong place at the wrong time, or even simply dare to exist in the vicinity of their own goddamn home. Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy, let me repeat that, 14-year-old boy, a kid, was brutally murdered simply because a white woman was offended by something he did. He was a kid. It's disgusting that someone would even dare to suggest that all men hold some kind of power over all women, and it speaks of ignorance that they think that black women face the same oppression that they do. Whenever someone speaks of preserving and embracing femininity and fertility, know that they're only advocating for white women, because women of color don't have the same privilege as white women do. They have a history of being masculinized in the eyes of those around them, and even forced sterilization. White women's liberation isn't applicable to women of other ethnicities and cultures. TERFs don't have a leg to stand on, so they will liken any backlash they face for their bigotry to historical oppression of women. For example, witch hunt. And yeah, no, that's pretty much the only thing they got. Of course, Vanessa made an entire video responding to ContraPoint's video on J.K. Rowling. They say life imitates art, so it's no coincidence that the figurehead of TERFism wrote a series about witches and wizards. And when the only actor that has come out in support of J.K. Rowling's transphobia is the one that played Voldemort, you just know it was meant to be. I also find it funny how they trust the morals of a woman who created a universe where actual slavery was treated as a moral grey area, and tried to convince everyone that Snape's redemption arc was anything but absolutely terrible and pathetic.
Held a book burning of the Harry Potter books along with other supposedly offensive material. I guess the reason I bring this up is to say that This isn't the first time J.K. Rowling has been the victim of a witch hunt.
Just because one group was outraged because of ludicrous reasons doesn't invalidate another group of people. One group is accusing her of promoting Satanism, and the other is condemning her for perpetuating transphobia.
Now, if you look at the YouTube policies, hate speech is very specifically inciting violence against another group or another person. At no point did I ever say that Sam or any trans-identified person should be subjected to violence. What I did say was they're not the sex they claim to be.
She's playing the same game that many reactionaries play. I'm not saying we should hurt gay people. I'm just saying that a lot of pedophiles are gay. How is that homophobic? I'm not promoting the murder of POC. I'm just saying that they're genetically inferior and studies show that they're more prone to violence. I'm not promoting eugenics. I'm just saying that if you're disabled, it would be better if you just adopt because your child would only suffer like you if you pass on your disability. Do you see where I'm getting at yet? Practically no one is outright telling others to go and assault minorities. But when you're spreading misinformation and do your best to convince others that trans people are predators and a danger, you're planting the seed in someone's head that will grow and fester until one day an unlucky trans person just so happens to cross their path, or even more likely, live in the same house, and these unhappy circumstances just so happens to cost them their life. Only last year, at least 44 trans and gender non-conforming people were murdered, and a majority of them were trans women of color. We're not upset because you refuse to acknowledge and validate our gender identities. I could give less of a shit what you think of me, because in my process of transitioning, I'm working on my self-image and realize who I am at my core. Because no matter where I am in my transition, I will always be me. The rest is just a shell that I'm working to be comfortable in. What I can't just sit back and watch you do, however, is make trans people out to be a threat. I can tell by watching Vanessa's videos that she isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. But I'd assume that she would know that as soon as you present or reinforce that something is a threat, there's gonna be people who react violently and perhaps even feel justified in doing so. This isn't about being critical when it comes to medical transition either. Believe it or not, I do think introspection is very important when you're making a bigger decision that will follow you for the rest of your life. I'm pretty sure all trans people would agree with that. It's just common sense, which TERFs seem to lack. Because their issue hinges upon the idea that men are predators and we need to keep women and children safe from. What does that have to do with trans people? As you might already know, these people think trans women are just men going through all these procedures simply to access children. Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. We're called bigoted, and like the reality is that the protected class now, it's not trans, it's pedophiles. You can't call out pedophiles. You can't call pedophiles disgusting. You can't say most pedophiles are males. You can't say pedophiles shouldn't have access to children. You can't say pedophiles ran the drag queen story hour. You can't call out pedophiles anymore because they're now the protected class. People think it's like, soon they will be, like, no, it's already happened. I have many videos talking about how this is pedophilic, and they were all deleted because it's true, so
These are very bold statements, and I don't mean it in a good way. The mental gymnastics you would have to make to come to the conclusion that trans women transition because they're actually just pedophiles, when it would have been so much easier to get a job as a teacher rather than socially transitioning, which makes you so much more vulnerable, by the way. Then again, there are cases of trans women that has blown up because they happen to be a predator, such as Jessica Geneve. She's not representative of trans women, neither does it mean that she's not actually trans and she's only pretending because she wants to gain access to children. Alas.
But I am well within my rights to say that I'm not accepting of paedophiles.
I think the solution is, there's a couple of solutions. First of all, don't let men near children. Unless, and like even their own children, you should be vetted, honestly.
Here's the problem with that. Not only do I not agree with the sentiment that trans women are men or that they were socialized as men and whatever the hell that debate is, but you're perpetuating the idea that only men can hurt children and that women are inherently trustworthy. And I'm leaving trans people out of the equation. She says that we know that most pedophiles are men, and yeah, that might very well be true. But what we also know is that when a woman molests a child, it's not taken seriously, especially if she's hot and her victim is a boy. So what I wonder is how many female pedophiles aren't being taken into account simply because of their perceived purity and supposed inherent caring nature. How many times have we seen the rape of a boy being labeled as sex, as to undermine what it was that really happened? Is it not inherently sexist to undermine the actions of a woman, even when it's in the context of her hurting a child? I'm really not trying to pull a not all men. I'm not saying that we can't be wary of men. By all means, stay away from men when you're out alone at night. Keep pepper spray and an alarm. But keep in mind that trans women aren't a symptom of rape culture, and they're more likely to fall victim to it themselves. So if her intentions truly were to protect others, then she's going about it completely wrong. Trying to pin this on anyone or any group of people is just a waste of time. And what we really should be turning our attention to is a system that allows this to happen in the first place. There's still laws that prevent people from creeping on others in the bathroom, for example. Just because a trans person is allowed in the bathroom of their gender doesn't mean they're allowed to assault anyone. The same way cis people aren't allowed to assault anyone. I've never been able to quite grasp why TERFs act as if public bathrooms are some sacred place of refuge. All we're doing is taking a piss in separate stalls. I don't know what they're doing in there that supposedly makes them extremely vulnerable, but to me it sounds like they're the creeps. The rest of us are just washing our hands.
Keep prisons single sex. You can read about what's happening in Canada, in the UK. There's men raping women in women's prisons. Please look it up because we need everyone to be aware of this and to fight back against this ideology.
I'm by no means trying to minimize what happened or say that it's for the greater good. We're looking at a problem, and if your intentions are to minimize any possible suffering, then moving trans women to men's prison will quite literally have the opposite effect. In a study of Californian prisoners housed in men's prison, it was found that 59% of trans women had experienced sexual abuse while incarcerated, compared to the 4% of their cis male counterparts. Men's prisons are very obviously a dangerous environment to trans women. I hate to make this argument, but even if you see them as men, as TERFs do, which is incorrect by the way, but if that's what you think they are, I don't see why that is a reason to put them at risk. Spoiler alert, it's because TERFs hate trans people and they think they're worthy of getting assaulted. Still, if this was an actual conversation about prisoners' well-being, we should rather be asking ourselves why we expect anything good to come from the prison system. It's ridiculous that we think that putting people who usually turn to criminality out of necessity in a prison cell and put them at risk of getting victimized and then expect them to reintegrate into society as soon as they've served their sentence. No matter what you do, trans people are always going to exist. We existed before any medical procedures that would alleviate our dysphoria and make life easier. Trans men who fled to live out their life as the men they truly felt they were and insisted that they weren't women. So don't tell me it was a disguise. Advocating against the healthcare that we need to survive, advocating to remove us from spaces where we're safe, isn't gonna make us go away. All it means is that we're gonna take a less safe route. Some of us are gonna get our hands on hormones somehow. We're gonna go stealth. Others won't even survive. I know me simply stating the fact that trans people are more likely to commit suicide is manipulative according to Vanessa.
One time she punched out the screen in her second-story window and tried to jump out.
I spent probably a couple hours trying to find some statistics on kids committing suicide under 10 years old, and it's like so ridiculously rare that there's no studies or statistics on it, so I'm gonna call bullshit on this story. I think this is just emotional manipulation to get people to feel sorry for her.
I don't see the point of trying to emotionally manipulate someone who clearly doesn't feel for other people. It's rare that kids under 10 attempt suicide, but shouldn't that actually speak for just how distressing it is to live in a body that doesn't match who you feel you are? 41% of trans people attempt suicide. That's simply a fact. If you know this and you're aware of the lethal consequences of denying them treatment but still advocate against trans rights, then that's your choice. All I'm doing is informing you what that entails. So if you're confident in your stance and you're positive that you're doing the right thing, then there's no reason for you to feel guilty when I simply tell you the cold, hard facts.
Wet ass P-word.
This woman thinks she knows better than doctors and professionals. She relies on pseudoscience, and she's no different from an anti-vaxxer. Vanessa has no qualification, and the only thing she should be trusted with is sewing clothes and taking your wedding pictures. She doesn't realize that the study of onset gender dysphoria is deeply flawed, since it's only based on the answers that parents that already weren't supportive of their trans kids. Soon after the study was originally published, they had to retract their statement, but that wouldn't stop transphobes from latching onto it as if their life depends on it. But why listen to professionals when what you actually need is to hit the gym, according to Vanessa?
Yeah, you get the same with anorexic communities as well.
It's exactly the same.
thing.
It's exactly the same kind of like artistically glorifying this violence that you can perpetuate against yourself and this self-destruction. So it's not exactly a new thing, right? Like teenage girls, like Abigail Shrier says this a lot in her book, like teenage girls have always been victim to falling prey to these mass delusions, and it used to be, you know, witch stuff and hysteria and whatever, like. But right now, it's this idea that cutting our breasts off is the way to free us from sexism. And it's like,
well,
no, it's just another way to glorify
when I was growing up, and what we're not told though is if it, like, I know it's not this way for everybody, but if you do want to be smaller up there, you just hit the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the gym, lift some weights, get fit.
Yeah. Oh, I lost a couple sizes, like bra sizes, when I lost weight, because it was a lot of it because boobs are mostly fat, right? It was a lot of fat.
That's what I'm saying.
And in your ass too, like if you feel like you can't fit your jeans or anything, like it really is
that's me.
Or hitting the gym, and but no one wants to hear that because it's not the same. It's not just you're perfect the way you are. Don't worry about it. Because I think
that's the problem. Because we're saying you're perfect the way you are, and then we're telling people to have surgery. Yeah. You could just go to the gym and get healthy and get fit, and you can literally pick out what body sculpting shape you want, and a personal trainer will tell you how to get that body shape.
Imagine telling trans people that they're just lazy and should hit the gym instead of getting top surgery. Please, for once, think before you speak. If this really was the case, then I wouldn't need top surgery. I've been working out my entire life. I have a really clean diet. You don't know what you're talking about. Even before I finally came out, I trained Kung Fu and I competed against cis men older than me with more experience than me, and I still came out on top. I got a trophy after coming first place in a tournament, and I haven't even taken testosterone. I might have a baby face, but I can throw down for real. To this day, I work out regularly and watch my diet. I lift weights to bulk up because that's the one thing I can do to somewhat alleviate dysphoria meanwhile I wait. I still have debilitating dysphoria, but this is something that I do to keep my head over water. I'm doing the most I can, so don't think you know anything about what I need and that surgery is just a quick fix. If there's anything I can do, I've already tried it. Cut my life into pieces, this is my last resort. Suffocation, no breathing, don't give a fuck if I cut my arm bleeding. Sorry, I couldn't help it. It's obvious that these people either have a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be trans, or they're simply dishonest pieces of shit, or both.
Part of the reason I wanted to make this video is to show how different it was to grow up as a tomboy in the early 2000s.
It's not very different now. I know loads of girls that were and still are tomboys, and never were they forced to be trans. It's like that one tweet, no one wants to turn your cis kids trans. We simply want your trans kid to survive. I'm gonna be real with you, Vanessa. Being a tomboy is not as controversial as you'd like to think it is. It's not groundbreaking. I was a tomboy before and no one thought much of it. In fact, that's what my family assumed it was when I first started crying about wanting to be a boy. I had gathered the courage to outright tell them that this is who I want to be, and I was promptly informed that it's actually just because I think that liking boy things must mean that I need to be a boy. Neither can you tell me that it was peer pressure or that I simply wanted to be celebrated for my bravery. I grew up in a very homophobic and transphobic environment. I was harassed and made fun of by other students simply for looking like a boy. Not because I was a tomboy, there's a huge difference. I looked queer. It's normal to dress comfortably and not wear makeup, but I wore binders, had a boy haircut, boys' clothes, and even wore men's underwear. I dressed up in suits when it was formal, and though I didn't identify as it at the time, if you didn't know me, it would be reasonable to assume that I was trans. Quite frankly, Vanessa's biggest mistake is thinking that she can get to the bottom of why people are trans by relating it to her own experience. That really isn't gonna work, because unless you're trans yourself, you're never gonna understand what it's like growing up feeling trapped in a role prescribed to you while trying to please those around you and survive. No one forced this identity upon me. In fact, I was told that I specifically shouldn't be this. But this is where I am now, at 20, faced with the same dilemma as when I was 15. I could either transition and pave the way for a future I actually want to live, or I could simply off myself. This time, I choose to continue living. The only thing that helps me get out of bed each morning is the hope that I'll get top surgery in the future. I am who I am, and I was like this way before I saw people like me. In fact, I was seeking them out at one point. Elliot coming out didn't change anything for me.
Harry Styles isn't just a person, he's a brand. He's a message. He's
very influential.
Yes. So, and in the same way that Elliot has been carefully manufactured into this trans propaganda machine, I think Harry Styles has been carefully manufactured into the person he is today. Because if you, like, he was in a boy band that was manufactured. Do you think he's actually, like, got any artistic ability or backbone? Or
I'm sorry, but Vanessa is sounding like a total dingus right now. Could you imagine if rather than trans people, she was talking about gay people? Just because she, as a straight person, can't understand why anyone would be attracted to the same sex, she can't just conclude that they've been groomed to be gay. The media is apparently on it too. They're making celebrities come out as gay as to convince teenagers that it's cool. What do they get out of it? Literally, what the fuck do they get out of it? She's straight up the kind of person that would spread anti-gay propaganda some decades ago, but here she is, acting like an ally to the LGBs, and even has the audacity to insert herself into the community. You already know she jumped on the super straight trend and called it the LGBS community. I've already made a video on it, so I won't go into details. Basically, it's embarrassing, it's cringe, for real.
And today I'm going to be making a video about my community. The super straights and the super lesbians and the super gays and the super bis. The LGBS, if you will.
A great way to just take a massive shit on literally all of us. I'm offended on behalf of everyone. I'm offended for lesbians, I'm offended for gay people, I'm offended for bi people, I'm offended for trans people, I'm offended for everyone. Because you feel entitled enough to put your stupid little sexuality next to actually oppressed sexualities. Though I hate the LGB trans exclusionary community, I would have appreciated it so much more, because at least it wouldn't be the same as literally just appropriating a movement we needed to combat people like her. I know there's lesbians, gay and bi people that approve of this behavior, and they're just as bad. They're an embarrassment to all of us. They have their rights because of black trans women like Marsha P. Johnson, who played a big role in the series of protests at Stonewall. And now that gay people are becoming more and more socially accepted, some of them just throw trans people under the bus now that they no longer need them as allies. Or actually, they've done that the entire time, but whatever. It's so cowardly, and these people should be really ashamed of themselves, their disappointments. Twit!
But the reason we need to have super in front of it now is because the LGBTQIA+++ alphabet community has decided that if you don't want to accept someone who identifies as trans into your dating pool, then you're transphobic, regardless of whether or not you're lesbian, gay, or straight.
I find it kind of funny that she made an entire video talking about this, when in reality it wouldn't be an issue if she just didn't assume that trans people would want to date her in the first place. I was actually surprised when I heard that she had a fiancé, but I guess there's someone out there for everyone. What's even funnier to me is the fact that her fiancé is from the UK, because I can't help but wonder if it's the TERF's version of when alt-right dudes get an Asian trophy wife because of fetishization. I imagine that she wanted someone from the UK because it's just like Harry Potter. It being a TERF's paradise is just icing on the cake. I'm sure she's just head over heels about the court ruling that makes it so that kids under 16 can't give informed consent to receive medical care, such as hormone blockers. She made an entire video about trans kids, in fact, where she was literally trying to make a case that allowing trans kids to get treated is actually Munchausen by proxy, which, to those of you who didn't already know, is when a caregiver makes up or causes the illness or injury to a person under their care. It's a form of abuse, obviously. It's kind of interesting, and I've read a bit about it, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend to be an expert. I'm sure it's way more complex than what I've learned from pop psychology. However, at its bare essentials, it's the caregiver that convinces everyone around them that the person they care for is sick or injured. It's in no way comparable to having a trans kid. You can't turn someone trans. By that logic, you would call it Munchausen by proxy to have a depressed kid. There's no critical thinking here, but it serves its purpose, which is to instill that trans kids is the same as abusing them. This is literally propaganda. She even used a picture of Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose in her thumbnail, which is probably the most famous case of Munchausen by proxy, which ended in actual murder. Vanessa doesn't make any points or even as much as try to explain how it's comparable to trans kids. Still, transphobes will eat it up simply because you first present an obviously bad case which evokes feelings of anger and makes you upset, as it should, which makes you blinded by your emotions, and that is when she hits you with that good old switcheroo and shifts the subject to be about trans kids, utilizing that anger. This is propaganda 101, unless you've already taken a solid stance on trans kids and medical intervention, which is unlikely if it doesn't affect you personally. It's probably gonna be pretty effective, which sucks. Making it so that you need to be above 16 to get hormone blockers literally negates the purpose of it. You've already started developing at that age, which is what hormone blockers are supposed to prevent. Though it has its side effects, like any other medicine, the benefits significantly outweigh that. Not only are they already used on cis kids to prevent early puberty, it's simply used to give kids time so that they can make a mature decision when they're older whether to take hormones. If they choose to live as their assigned gender at birth, they could easily stop taking hormone blockers and they would go through their natural puberty just later. But people like her aren't actually making an argument with the kid's best interest at heart. Their concern about the possible side effects is just a front to take away the healthcare of trans kids. Otherwise, they would be making the same argument about antidepressants. Antidepressants can worsen suicidal ideation, and someone who was too depressed to get out of bed before might now have the energy to finally get up and end themselves. Should we stop prescribing them too?
I think if you're still young enough that you get emotional and scared by needles, you're too young to make a decision about irreparably changing your body.
This is such a fucking stupid argument. This is from a documentary called Transhood, which followed trans kids for several years and documented their development, which I watched, simply to get the full context. I would also definitely recommend watching it. It's a good watch. The boy we see is Jay, and that was his first time taking puberty blockers. At no point in the documentary was Jay or any of the other kids coerced into thinking that they were trans. It was very obvious that this is something the kids wanted, and in many of the cases their parents thought it was a phase, or just a kid being a kid with imagination. No one is actually really prepared to have a trans kid, so I can't really blame them. If your quote-unquote daughter starts saying that he's a boy, you're probably gonna assume that he's playing pretend, and it's the same as your kid pretending to be Spider-Man or a princess. This is exactly the way these parents treated it, and I don't blame them at all. We're not all born super woke and educated. In Jay's case, his mom described how he would insist that he was a boy, and she would correct him and tell him that no, you're actually a girl. It wasn't until he changed school and his mom found out that he had been telling everyone that he was actually a boy that she finally realized that this isn't just a game, and that's when she started taking him seriously. This is not comparable to Munchausen by proxy, where one might get medications to purposely make someone under their care sick. This boy clearly wanted this. His mother even described how he would put ice packets on his chest as he slept, which she would have to go and remove. It was a desperate attempt at preventing development in any way he could at home. With early intervention, you'll spare him all the pain that comes with developing in a way that leaves you miserable. If he was denied hormone blockers, he would, like many of us, develop breasts and wider hips. That wouldn't stop him from being trans though, and it most certainly wouldn't stop him from having gender dysphoria. He would resort to binding, which can be damaging if not done properly. You need a special binder, which is expensive, and even then you can't wear it 24/7. Lots of us know better, but our dysphoria can be debilitating enough that we're willing to risk breaking ribs and cause permanent damage. Not everyone can afford good binders, and some will even use duct tape, which you absolutely shouldn't do. Don't do it, kids. No duct tape. I know it's hard, but don't do it. If we instead are provided with hormone blockers, we won't have to go through bigger procedures in the future. Jay's mom said herself that thanks to hormone blockers, Jay won't have to use his college funds to pay for any top surgery. It also means that your hips won't get wider, which I would honestly kill for. Though a lot of us have top surgery, hip dysphoria is something a lot of us just kind of have to accept and live with. From what I can tell, there's not really any surgeries for hip bones. I've read that it's extremely fragile and some kind of hip reconstruction would probably be a bad idea. Though take this with a grain of salt, since this is only what someone at Reddit said 6 years ago. What you can get, however, is some kind of liposuction to get a more masculine fat distribution, something that piqued my interest. My point is that hormone blockers will spare you from a lot of dysphoria and possibly even surgery. There's a lot of other out of context clips in Vanessa's video where a kid is upset and she's trying to portray it as the result of them being trans, when in most cases they're upset because of transphobia, not because they're trans. The solution isn't to stop being trans if transphobia upsets you either. However, I'm gonna spare you from her bullshit because I have had enough of her. I'm not expecting to change her mind, otherwise I wouldn't have been this rude in this video. I've spent a lot of time digging through her content and I truly believe she's just a very dishonest person. What I want to do, however, is educate people who are in good faith and might be more susceptible to TERF rhetoric. It can be difficult to watch. I myself had a few sad boy nights while making this because I was immersing myself in the world of transphobia. I was already balls deep in the research for this video, so I wasn't going back now. Besides, I'm very passionate about this. We're talking about my rights after all. If you made it to the end of this video, then please allow yourself a break, watch something funny, because this isn't fun to hear. I know that when you go out looking for this content, it can feel like the entire world hates you, but that is not true. There's a lot of people out there on your side. She's just a loud minority. It's difficult right now with everything going on in the world, but I hope we can work towards a better future where trans people can be understood and accepted. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and perhaps consider subscribing if you haven't already. You can find me at Twitter, where I'm usually active, so follow me at Muggen Mylle if you feel like it. Hope to see you in another video. As always, take care.